Hey, this is Catch Wheeler with FTR, aka one half of the greatest tag team of all time, the current AAA tag team champions, saying go right now, savewithconrad.com, and I promise you, you won't regret it. This is I think maybe the third one he's helped me buy now. I want to just keep investing in property, basically. I want to have a couple of income properties so I can have passive income for after wrestling, because obviously there's a shelf life for what we do to our bodies. And so Conrad's been one of the main components for that for me. My schedule is not easy for anybody. Like, I had to push this past closing date back a couple of days because we were going to be doing a show at Arthur Ashe Stadium in New York. They're like, yep, we can push it. We can close it on the 24th. Don't worry about it. Go to work. We'll see you on closing day. So they were good about coming back to me and circling back and reminding me or giving me a gentle nudge. So when closing day got there was no surprises. There was no, oh, we didn't have this, we forgot that, we still need you to get here for that. This is going to be something that I want to keep adding properties. Like, I'm in the process right now. I was talking to my realtor yesterday about a place I'm putting an offer on today. So if they accept that offer, I'm going right back to Conrad. That's how confident I am with working with these people. Like, I'm going to keep buying and I'm going to keep going back.
Hey guys, Double J, Jeff Jarrett. Need to call a timeout real quick here. I wanted to tell your listeners what I've been telling my world listeners for a while now. It's about all the incredible things happening over on adfreeshows.com.
We're joined by Wrestling Royalty as David Crockett takes us month by month through Jim Crockett Promotions booking logs. David and Conrad dive into the towns, matches, and money of JCP in January 1985 on The Book.
Charlotte is really the home of Jim Crockett Promotions, is it not?
It is. Yes. It's the home. The thing is, the Greensboro was always the home of Starrcade. Any, yes. That the bigger matches we would take to Greensboro. Main reason is over the whole area, we had more population and road systems going to Greensboro than we did Charlotte.
We look back on the Turner years with the men who lived them. For the first time ever, JR, Eric, and Tony sit down with a couple of drinks and share stories like you've never heard before on the Ad-Free Show's exclusive After Hours.
For the 19th time, I had a regular size, grown up refrigerator. I was a grown-up man. And I had a washer and dryer. Shazam! And they were moved by Turner from Texas to Atlanta. They told me we're going to put them in storage while you stay at such and such hotel downtown.
Chat one-on-one with the Podfather, an extension of the popular Ask Conrad mailbag series. Conrad talks live with Ad-Free Shows members, answering their questions about wrestling, mortgages, and everything in between.
I appreciate you saying that. I feel the same way. I've met a lot of great people through here, and we all have something in common, and that's our love of wrestling and our inability to just let it go. We all have this insatiable thirst and quest for more, and we want to learn more and be more involved. And I think it's cool that we all really, for lack of a better word, share a passion like that. And as a result, man, we can have a lot of fun together.
Hey, that's just a small taste of what Ad-Free Shows has waiting for you, including a brand new perk, getting to join in on the live recordings of the shows with 4 levels to choose from. See for yourself why Ad-Free Shows is the best value in wrestling today. Sign up now at adfreeshows.com. That's right, sign up today at adfreeshows.com.
Hey, it's Conrad Thompson, and you're listening to Grilling JR with the voice of wrestling, Mr. Jim Ross. Jim, how are you, man?
I'm good, Connie. I'm good. Good to see you. Good to be back on the air today. We got a good show coming up about one of my favorite guys, one of the top talents ever, Ted DiBiase, the $1 Million Man. And so we should have some fun with this thing. But I'm glad to be here. I'm footballed out though. I gotta take a time out. We're taping this thing on Monday morning of MLK Day.
Yes.
And so there's one more game to watch: the Cowboys and the Buccaneers.
Yes, sir.
Tom Brady's and their quarterback's name is Dak Prescott.
Yes.
He's got to play better. And you ain't got to worry about Brady choking, but this Dak Prescott dude, he needs to have a good game. He hadn't had one in a while. So, but I'm still buzzing about the Jaguars win. My God,
what a game!
I don't know how you couldn't write a script any better than that. It was amazing.
When it was over, I tweeted out NFL should be Booker of the Year because that finish and just, I mean, really the entire, with the exception of the 49ers second half, the entire slate of games this weekend was incredible. And
yeah,
as much as I love pro wrestling, man, when football's that good, there's just damn near nothing better.
I agree.
I loved it, and I hope you guys did too. And I'm going to love our topic today. Of course, we're gearing up for, can't believe it, this is Royal Rumble month. And as we're talking, next weekend is Royal Rumble. But before we get there, we're going to talk about somebody that a lot of our listeners, myself included, grew up with, Ted DiBiase. And of course, his most iconic character, without question, is the $1 Million Man character. And we're going to get there. But you actually knew Teddy way back when. And he's our topic today because as we're talking, 2 days from now, as folks are listening to this, yesterday was Teddy's birthday, January 18th, 1954. So happy birthday to the $1 Million Man, Ted DiBiase. And I guess we should remind everybody that he's sort of second generation in his own right. His adopted father, Iron Mike DiBiase, and his biological mother, Helen, were both wrestlers. What a heritage to follow here. Did you ever get to see much Iron Mike DiBiase?
Just on film clips, he was what you would expect from a former amateur, a solid, fundamentally sound, ground attack guy, good psychology, hell of an athlete. But I never saw him in person. But I've seen him on clips from time to time. He was really good, very basic, very fundamentally sound. And then, of course, Teddy's mom was a wrestler. And that's where his dad, or his adopted father, and her met. So at wrestling. So it goes way back as far as Teddy's DNA is concerned.
Of course, we should talk about the most notable thing, unfortunately, that most wrestling fans know about Iron Mike DiBiase, Ted's adopted father, is he sadly died during a match in Lubbock, Texas. It's a match against Man Mountain Mike. His father takes a bump out of the floor and collapses. And the story was that Harley Race tried to rush down the ringside and perform CPR, but is unable to revive him. It's pretty rare, thankfully, that we hear about folks passing away in the course of a wrestling match. Of course, sadly, it happened a few years ago in Mexico as well. Is this the first in-ring death you remember hearing about in professional wrestling?
I think it is. I'm sure there probably is something else. There were others. I think Ray Gunkel may have died in the ring. For another former amateur that was deeply involved in the Georgia promotion. He might be in that argument, but it was significant at that time. Nobody had ever encountered, I don't think, this sadness too often. So it was but it was a headline, no doubt about that. And Iron Mike was a territory guy, so he didn't get the national exposure that guys today are getting. It's funny how the business has been affected by the lack of territories, and it's really kind of unique in a lot of ways. So, but yeah, he was really good. He was really good, and great role model for Teddy, I think. And I don't know how he could have done anything else but wrestle.
Right.
Teddy, playing football at West Texas State on a scholarship there in Amarillo. That's where he got connected to the Funks. And of course, the Funks had their Amarillo territory, was based there in Amarillo. And so Teddy was just a big mark for the business and was just trying to figure out how to get in it because he knew he wasn't going to get into the NFL based on his football skills, his size and things like that. He was a good sized guy, but he was not big enough to play in the offensive line in the NFL. But But that's not what his goal was anyway. His goal was to get booked by the Funks and start his pro wrestling career. And that's kind of what we're talking about here today. He had a destination. He had a journey to get on. And the key was just, how is this journey going to work out for him? And obviously, as we're going to discuss, it worked out very well.
Yes, it did. Just to add context, Iron Mike passes away when Teddy is just 15 years old. And unfortunately, as the story goes, allegedly, Teddy's mom starts to cope with the passing of her fallen husband with alcohol. And she passes away at just 58 years old, way, way too young.
Yeah, God, yes.
As a result, Ted, as you said, does wind up at West Texas State. He's going to be there on a football scholarship, but ultimately drops out because he gets injured in his senior year. And that's when he's going to start to pursue a career in pro wrestling. And if you're watching along with us on YouTube, you can see the old school photo of Ted DiBiase. It's always fun to see wrestlers sort of before they were famous, back when they were a civilian, years before the $1 Million Man. There he is.
Yeah.
Here's a quote from Terry Funk. Although he was offered a football scholarship at the University of Arizona, I steered him to West Texas State University. While I wanted to make sure he finished college and earned his degree, I also wanted Teddy and Canyon for selfish reasons so that I could watch him play football. What I didn't realize about Teddy was that he came to West Texas State to not only play football and get a degree, but also to pursue a career in professional wrestling. That's directly out of Terry Funk's book, as you see there, if you're watching along with us on YouTube. And let's just take a minute and talk about that school, because as I understand it, the Funk brothers went there, Dusty Rhodes went there, Stan Hansen went there, Tully Blanchard went there, Tito Santana went there. I mean, this is a who's who, including Bruiser Brody and Manny Fernandez. And what was it about
Tully Blanchard?
What was it about West Texas State that just got all these wrestlers going here?
I think it's more than anything is the number one, the influence of pro wrestling that the pro wrestling had in that marketplace, thanks to the Funks and Mr. Funk's promotion. I think it's coincidence, Conrad. I don't know if there's anything in the water. I think that it was just coincidence. And but the Funks being established in that marketplace and being so charismatic, alpha male like athletes gravitated to the Funks. They had charisma, they had a track record, they were famous, and very famous in that market. So it was interesting to see how that all continued to evolve, and it evolved so well. Some of the biggest stars in the history of pro wrestling came out of this university.
It's remarkable to see those old school photos. If you haven't before, check us out on YouTube, Grilling JR on YouTube.com. I've never seen that collection of photos all together like that. From left to right, you see Terry Funk and Dory Funk and Bruiser Brody and Tito Santana and Stan Hansen. And then you got, the whole second row. On the bottom right, there's Tully Blanchard, there's Manny Fernandez, there's Bobby Duncombe, there's Kelly Kaniski, Dusty Rhodes wearing a baseball hat. This is fun stuff. Hopefully you're checking this out over on YouTube. Let's talk about what happens with Teddy when it gets to wrestling. He's going to start training at the age of 20, learning from two of the very best that ever did it, Terry Funk and Dory Funk Jr. You see a very early photo of Ted DiBiase in his wrestling training. And
looks like his son, doesn't he?
He does.
His oldest son and he have amazing resemblance. And as you can tell, Teddy wasn't a body guy. He was a wrestler. He was an athlete.
Similar to your early career path, Jim, Ted starts as a referee, but he's starting in Amarillo in June of '74. And it's amazing when you think about the guys who started around that time. 1974. I mean, it's guys like Ric Flair and Ricky Steamboat and Ted DiBiase, a whole new crop of stars.
Yours truly.
Yeah, absolutely.
I wasn't a star, but that's when I started. 74 was just a unique year. A lot of guys were finding their way into this crazy business.
Ted goes to Mid-South in 1975 and starts working for Bill Watts and Leroy McGuirk for about a year. And I think, based on the timing, that's probably when you get to meet Ted. Do I have that right?
Yeah, exactly. I met Teddy in '74. I had just gotten in the business, and we were very close to the same age. I think Teddy's 2 years younger than me, so we were from the same generation.
Yes.
And both of us starting our little journeys of what we believe to be the path we needed to be on.
What was your first impression of Teddy when you met him?
He had great size because he was 6'3", I think. Size was one thing. I think more than anything, his intellect. He got it. And he was a good student of the game. So I think his intellect was something really special. He just gravitated to the intricacies and the nuances of the pro wrestling business about as seamlessly and smoothly as anyone I can recall.
I think his first match is in Mid-South is actually a TV match against Danny Hodge. Now, some of our younger listeners might not be super familiar with Danny Hodge. Thankfully, you are. But my goodness, your first match in the territory is a TV match against a guy who could, anytime he wants to, crush every bone in your body just with any hand he had free.
Yeah.
Talk to us about Danny Hodge.
It was pretty intimidating for Teddy to have to get in the ring with a guy that was known as, superhuman. And Hodge was superhuman. I mean, it's just, I know I'm a big mark for him, and he was my boyhood hero because, pardon me, he was on TV every week in a babyface role on top. So that influenced a young JR without question. But Hodge's reputation of being a badass preceded him. As I've said this many times, the talents are just lucky that Hodge is such a sweetheart of a guy. If he had been a bully type personality, he could have been very hard to deal with because you couldn't beat him. He was just, there's nobody like him. And I know it's a big statement to say, but here's a guy that goes to a D1 Division I college, University of Oklahoma, and wrestled. And he was there on the varsity for 3 years. They didn't have freshmen then eligible, or he'd have been a freshman All-American, but he never lost.
Right.
Conrad, he had, I don't know how many seasons he had that he didn't lose a point, meaning no one ever escaped. So he was a special breed of cat, and nobody was ever like Danny Hodge. He had that strength that, I've seen him tear phone books and break pliers. I've seen it with my own eyes, where he just pop a pair of pliers, boom. And you can imagine if he's going to do that to a pair of pliers, what it could do to your wrist or your ankle or any other part of your anatomy that he wanted to grab hold of. So he was special. And again, thank God for the wrestling business that he was such a sweetheart of a person.
Well, I love talking about the way wrestling used to be, and Danny Hodge is certainly a big part of that, but so is Leroy McGuirk. And you've got a pretty famous Leroy McGuirk, Ted DiBiase story that I want us to talk about. But before we do, I want to talk about something that JR and I know a lot about, and that's saving money. Yeah. JR is pretty old school. He likes to say things like my parents do. It's not how much you make, it's how much you save. Well, maybe it's one of your New Year's resolutions to start saving money and maybe get out of debt faster. Let me go ahead and recommend Rocket Money, formerly known as Truebill. It's a personal finance app that finds and cancels your unwanted subscriptions, and it monitors your spending. It even helps you lower your bills, and it does it all in one place. Now, I have to admit, I thought, man, I'm on top of this sort of thing. How much are they going to be able to save me? Well, here's what happened. I signed up. I checked out what was known at the time as Truebill. Now it's called Rocket Money. And I saw I was subscribed to something called DAZN, and it was charging me $39 or $29 a month.
Wow.
Now, I guess I signed up for it a year and a half ago because I wanted to watch one fight and never turned it on again. So I spent $400 on one fight accidentally. I just wasn't keeping up with it. That'll never happen again, thanks to Rocket Money. Another thing I found out is that my wife and I both signed up for Paramount Plus. She was paying for it, and so was I. It even came off the same credit card, or debit card rather, and we never knew. We only used it once. We watched TV together. So what are we doing? We are saving money because we signed up for Rocket Money. Over 80% of people have subscriptions they forgot about. Maybe it's a streaming service you bought that you just wanted one show on and now that show is over. Maybe you fell for the old free trial scam and you never even used it. Rocket Money will quickly and easily identify your subscriptions for you so you can stop paying for the ones you don't want. By the way, Rocket Money makes canceling subscriptions as easy as the click of a button. All you do is find the subscription you don't want and press the word cancel. Ta-da! Rocket Money does the rest for you. They'll cancel it for you. No more long hold times with customer service. No more tedious emailing back and forth. In fact, over 3 million people have used Rocket Money now, and they're saving up to $720 a year for the average person. I'm saving more than that. As I mentioned, I saved half of that just with one app, DAZN. Here's the thing. Stop throwing your money away. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions and manage your expenses the easy way by going to rocketmoney.com/JR. That's rocketmoney.com/JR. rocketmoney.com/JR.
Hell of a deal. We waste so much money in our lives. You don't really realize it, as Conrad was explaining. And this will summarize it, get it all in one spot where you have the choice to go in there and hit that magic little button, cancel. And while you're canceling, you're saving money. You're not canceling money, you're canceling expenses and money you're not even knowing you're spending. So it's a hell of an idea. It's a great concept. Hope you'll try it, folks. It'll save you some cash and get you clean, get you clear the board of all those expenses that you just don't need to be paying.
There it is, rocketmoney.com/JR. So, Jim, we teased it before the break. I would love to hear from you about your now legendary Leroy McGuirk, who was one of your first mentors in the wrestling business, as I understand it.
Yeah.
And what would become one day the $1 Million Man, Ted DiBiase.
Well, Teddy was just an average guy as far as dating and things like that. He just gotten out of college and his first territory was there working for Leroy and Cowboy. So he had a auspicious start. But along the way, he met Leroy's lovely daughter, Michael Kathleen McGuirk. And she did a lot of ring announcing for WWF back in the day. And really a wonderful lady, still around, still beautiful, still lovely and nice. So Teddy, being young and liking younger ladies, he and Mike had a relationship. Now, the only catch in that matter was Leroy had a house rule that his daughter would not date wrestlers. But that kind of fell by the wayside, unbeknownst to Leroy, who, by the way, was blind. He'd had no sight. And so one day we're going to go to Shreveport, Leroy and I, in his Cadillac. I'd never even ridden a Cadillac before. And I am driving the boss. And Leroy, we got in the car, his Cadillac, and headed from Tulsa to Shreveport on a little drive. It's about 5 hours, I think it was, 5 or 6, around 300 miles, whatever. And then all of a sudden he has a satchel with him, which, I figured the satchel was just for essentials. He had his coffee can in there. That's what he used as an ashtray, because he was a big old Folgers coffee can. And so he set that in the floorboard of the car. And then he reached back into that satchel and pulled out the biggest goddamn handgun I've ever seen. It was one of those dirty, hairy Clint Eastwood, type guns.
Yes.
Big old 38 special or something like that. Some exotic thing, but it was a badass gun. And so he took that gun out. Unbeknownst to me, I didn't know why. And he put it on the dashboard, the dash of the car. So the more he drank, and he was drinking the entire time, he would, if he put that gun there, and the gun then, if I made a little turn in the road, the gun would slide across the loaded 38, let's say, would slide across the dashboard. And it was disconcerting, to say the least. A loaded handgun of that magnitude just running free. And so I said, Leroy, I was curious, obviously, as any young lad would be. Why we had that gun out? Because I thought there's something I needed to know.
Right.
And he said, well, when we get to Shreveport, you're going to help me kill the $1 million. You're going to help me kill Ted DiBiase. I said, excuse me, sir? You're going to help me kill Ted DiBiase. So I'm thinking, well, this is going to be a good day. I can see myself, young, bright little face, chubby kid, how popular I would be in prison. I'd probably have thousands of cigarette cases. It's just terrible. I was worried about. I saw my life flash before me. I'd never been exposed to something like this.
Right.
So, nonetheless, we stopped along the way at this place we always stopped at to eat. And I remember very vividly how I had to plan Leroy's meal. Everything was on a clock. So if he ordered fried chicken for lunch, it was at noon. And if he ordered mashed potatoes with it, it was at 3. So everything had a designation. It had a, so that's how I fed him.
Right.
And so while he was eating, I slipped away and went to the payphone. We didn't have cell phones then. I went to the payphone and I called the office collect. And when you call collect from the road, you always use the name Gene Kaninsky. So it's a collect call from Gene Kaninsky where you accept the charges. And so I finally got Bill on the phone that he was actually in Shreveport waiting on us. And I told him what was going on. And Leroy was drinking. We are going to kill Ted DiBiase, and we're going to do it in Shreveport tonight. Once we arrive, he's dead. So I told that to Cowboy, who laughed. He thought it was funny. I didn't. And so anyway, we get to Shreveport, and Leroy says, here's what we're going to do. You're going to set me in front of the door. So when the door opens, it's right in front of me. And I'm going to start shooting. And and you don't need to be there because you've already done your job. Your job was to get Ted DiBiase to my hotel. And so I don't remember how that went about. I think I saw Grizzly Smith or somebody. And that's how the word was going to get to Teddy. Good. The good news is that Teddy never showed up. He was tipped off that there was a plot to kill him. And Leroy and that boy, the kid, which is me, were waiting on him. Like, wait a minute, I ain't fucking waiting on nobody. I drove the man, my boss, to work. And along the way, I hear this plan of murder. And so anyway, Cowboy comes over and we put Leroy to bed so he could sleep it off. And we took command of his weapon. So there's never a shot fired. What the intentions were, and were to kill DiBiase, kill Teddy. And then thank God it never occurred. It never materialized. So that was my little story there about that deal. Nice trip to Shreveport, several miles, and going to work, all this other stuff, and my dream job, making $125 a week. Yeah, wasn't that something? I don't know, $1.25, all in. There's no expenses on the road. Leroy would pay for things and give me his credit card or give me the cash, and I never cheated him at all. He'd give me money. Said, "Is that a 20?" And it would be 100. Let's say. I could easily have said, "Yes, that's a 20," and kept the change. I never, because I always figured these guys are shady. It's like being in a little, not horribly violent mafia. So maybe they had a plan to test me. So the good news is, don't cheat, don't lie, especially to your bosses or anybody else. You don't need to remember. I don't need to have to think about what I told somebody.
That's right.
If I told them the truth, then you're good. So anyway, that was where that story came from, and it's a pretty famous story in that respect. I use it in the one-man shows several times. Always gets a good laugh, good interesting. And if I'm drinking, and I might be a little more colorful than here today on this platform. But it was a hell of a deal. I had 300 miles to think about going to prison for murder, and it wasn't cool for I was 22 years old.
Man, what a story. I don't know that we'll be able to top that. The
Well,
plot.
I'll make something up. I'll lie about something else.
Well, thankfully he survives, and then he
Yes.
starts working for Bob Geigel's Central States promotion and Sam Mushnick's popular St. Louis-based group. And success comes early for the young fan favorite, and he soon wins his first title, the Central States Heavyweight Championship. He won it from drill instructor Bob Slaughter, who is going to eventually become Sergeant Slaughter.
Right.
That happens July 19th, 1977. He scores another Central States title in January the following year and follows that win by also capturing, at the time, a pretty doggone prestigious Missouri Heavyweight Championship a month later.
Yeah, that's how he made a living, Connie, because there just wasn't much money in the Central States territory.
Right.
That was the bad rap on Geigel's territory, was that pay was horrible. They just weren't drawing. They had nobody over. And the irony is that to get talent in, you had to guarantee money.
Right.
Geigel was old school. He wasn't going to guarantee any money. So it was a tough environment. You're damned if you do and damned if you don't. We want you to come in, you work on top, you'll get main events, et cetera, et cetera. But still, there was no cash involved. There's no significant money involved. So that's kind of where that was. You're damned if you do and trying to get new talent, because they're not coming in because they know that the money is limited. And so a lot of guys just kind of pass through Central States as a way to learn, as a stopover, because you could damn sure learn things in that territory. There are a lot of, they had good workers. They just didn't have any ticket selling stars to any large degree. They had some, no doubt. Harley was there in and out because he was a champ. But there were other guys that were good. The Assassins worked there for a good while, and they were probably as good a tag team as you'll ever find. So it was a tough scenario to get talent in there. But when Sam Muchnick got eyes on Teddy, and Sam was a fan of Ted's Iron Mike's work, and so that was Teddy's connection. And Mr. Muchnick gave Teddy an opportunity based on that, knowing his father, gave him a chance. And Teddy, ironically, shouldn't be a big surprise, got over. And so when Teddy became the Missouri champion, and you're right, Conrad, that Missouri State Championship was very, very valued. A lot of the top guys in the entire world had held that title. And more often than not, it seemed like it was a title that was the next step from an NWA title opportunity. So it was really cool to see how that worked out. But the Missouri State title, a regional title, a state title, was so important in Ted's career and in the career of a lot of other guys.
No doubt. I mean, when you think about all the guys who actually held that title, I mean, it does read like a who's who. Harley Race, David Von Erich, Ric Flair, Dick the Bruiser, Ken Patera, Jack Briscoe, Dick Murdoch, Bob Backlund, Terry Funk, Johnny Valentine. I mean, this is a who's who, and a lot of people, as you said, sort of, let's make a WWF analogy, because a lot of our listeners grew up, myself included, in that golden age of the 1980s as a WWF fan. It used to be the trajectory would include maybe you're a tag champ, then you're an intercontinental champ, then you're the world champ. That's the lineage we would see for guys like Shawn Michaels or Bret Hart, et cetera, et cetera. You sort of worked your way up. Well, the Missouri title was kind of that for the old 10 pounds of gold. And it's once he is the Missouri champion that he starts to get national attention, national write-ups in the wrestling magazines. And all of a sudden people are talking about this handsome young babyface who's now in high demand around the country. He's first going to pop in for the WWF for about a year in 1979, or I guess back then it's called the WWF.
Yeah.
But I want to ask, like, since you're seeing him as a babyface, and just to sort of give a refresher of sorts, good looking young baby faces were the thing. And if you were going to be a heel, you might be a grizzled older veteran sort of deal. You need somebody who's mean and nasty and all of that. We know that DiBiase is going to enjoy his greatest national success as a heel.
Right.
You really got to see him cut his teeth and become a star as a babyface. Did you prefer him as a babyface or a heel? And could you have even imagined when he was having success as a babyface, hey, this guy's going to be a prolific heel one day?
Well, normally, Conrad, when you see a guy that's really proficient as a babyface, and he or she are learning crowd psychology. Crowd psychology is something that is you learn crowd psychology. You learn the ins and outs of the business, not just one phase of the business and being a babyface or a heel. You learn it all,
right?
Because you're not wrestling. You're not wrestling solo. You got a guy in there dancing with you, and he or she are going to bring something to the table that you can learn from. I just thought that Teddy was such a student of the game that any characterization of him would be successful because he knew his strengths, he knew his weaknesses, he understood the ins and outs of the character of either a heel or a babyface. So I wasn't totally shocked, but if I had to pick one character, one side of the fence or the other for him to play on, I would have said a heel. He was a great wrestling heel. And he also had that great voice. He didn't have a babyface voice. Stereotypically, he had that big booming voice, laugh. So he was. I thought he was a great heel. He was a wrestling heel, and wrestling heels' traits are very simple. They think they're the best wrestler in the match.
Yes.
Until they start getting out wrestled by the babyface, at which time they're very willing to cheat to gain an unfair advantage in the form of being a heel. And so that was a psychology. You try to out wrestle the babyface, you brag about it, you laugh about it, you whatever about it, you feel good about yourself, and all of a sudden the babyface starts countering, starts out wrestling the heel, and now what does the heel do? The heel has got to cheat to regain an advantage and get one step closer to winning the match. So, but Mr. Mushnick got Teddy booked in New York. Sam and I guess Vince Sr. were friends, associates for sure. They've been around each other forever. At one time, Mr. McMahon, the senior, was a member of the National Wrestling Alliance.
Mm.
So they went to those meetings together and communicated. They shared a champion when the champions. Because Sam Mushnick booked the NWA champion. Sam was the booker of all that. He's the one that sent guys to much like Mr. McMahon sent Andre out.
Right.
Sam would book the NWA champion and send him out, and that included Japan and around the world and so forth. So Mr. Mushnick wielded a lot of power, not only as president of the alliance, but controlling that title belt. And it's the difference in having a hell of a week for your territory or not. And so Sam had a lot of credibility, a lot of power, and Teddy was one of his boys. So and that was a hell of a lucky break for Ted, quite frankly.
Well, I'll tell you this. I can't imagine being thrown into this wrestling world. Your adopted father now he's no longer with you, and your mom is struggling and having some stuff. And now you're on the road, man. It's got to be stressful. And I want to talk about those stresses for a minute. This podcast is sponsored by BetterHelp Online Therapy. Here's the deal, guys. Relationships take work. And a lot of us will drop anything to help someone out that we care about. We'll go out of our way to treat other people well, but let's think about this. How often do we give ourselves the same treatment? This month, BetterHelp Online Therapy wants to remind you to take care of the most important relationship you have, the one you have with yourself. Whether it's hitting the gym or making time for your haircut or even trying therapy, you are your greatest asset. So invest the time and effort into yourself like you do for other people. And I have to admit that I have prioritized work and finances and other things in my life, and not really ever occasionally thought, maybe I need to work on this or that. And that happened to me in 2006 when a relationship ended, and man, I didn't know how to handle that. It felt better for me to talk to someone who wasn't in my immediate circle. I didn't really want to talk to my friends or family. It was embarrassing to have this relationship end, and I didn't know how to sort it out in my head. I needed to learn some new coping skills. I needed to think about it from a new approach. And in-person therapy really worked for me. But BetterHelp is online therapy that offers video, phone, and even live chat sessions with your therapist. So you don't even have to see anyone on camera if you don't want to. And that would have been a lot easier for me. As it was, I had to schedule it in my day and drive across town and fill out paperwork. And man, it's just, it can be a little, I had anxiety just going in there. Well, this is much more affordable than what I was doing. You see, BetterHelp is much more affordable than in-person therapy. And you can be matched with a therapist in under 48 hours. So it could also be faster. So why not give it a try? See why over 2 million people have used BetterHelp online therapy. This podcast is sponsored by BetterHelp, and Grilling JR with Jim Ross listeners can get 10% off their first month at betterhelp.com/JR. That's BETTERHELP, betterhelp.com/JR. And Jim, you've ran an organization and put together rosters, and it's important to have something in your back pocket like BetterHelp online therapy, is it not?
Oh yeah. Well, we all have to man or woman up.
Yes.
And not be so egocentric and proud. If that's a good term. It's a dumb way to do it, but it's don't be weak. Being weak is doing nothing about what you perceive to be an issue when the issue that you have can be solved.
Yes.
You know, one of the things I try to do as I've become older is I don't worry a lot about things I cannot control.
Yes.
And I used to be so obsessive in that respect that everybody else's problem became my problem because that's just how I approach things. And it added a lot of stress to my life. There's a lot of ways to cope, but you can't cope if you don't do a damn thing. And this is something you can do that I promise you that will help you. And then you become a better human being and you feel better. So give it a shot, folks. It's going to help you. I promise it's going to help you.
I learned a lot of new coping skills, and I felt like a new man after talking to somebody. I think you will too. Take care of yourself, folks. Go to betterhelp.com/JR. Save 10% off your first month. Let's start back into our call or our talk about Ted DiBiase. We mentioned he winds up in the Worldwide Wrestling Federation. That's 3 W's for those of you counting, in 1979. And he's billed as the first WWF North American heavyweight champion. He loses it to Pat Patterson just before Pat Patterson becomes the first Intercontinental Champion, winning that very prestigious tournament down in Rio de Janeiro.
Rio, baby.
Wink, wink.
Yeah.
And from what I understand, Vince even made sure to try to encourage Pat Patterson to say you won it in Rio de Janeiro, because of course, Pat being ESL, he really struggled with that word. So he would just say Rio for short, which is super fun. The good old days where you could just have phantom tournaments in wrestling. I don't think that would fly these days.
No. Social media is going to put a kibosh on that deal. But
Yeah.
It was funny. That story went around and lasted forever. Hey, when I first got in the wrestling business, early times for me, I believe that story. I thought they had a tournament in Rio and it was a big deal and Patterson won it.
Right.
But no. Your naivete is showing. So anyway, it was, but that story has been around forever. And again, it was told so much. It's like the old expression: if you say something enough,
Yeah.
it becomes true.
Yes.
It's sad to say, but it's truth. That's the truth. So, in any event, Teddy was being taken care of. That was because he had great skill. He was young. Wrestling fans love youth. They love things that are new and fresh. Surprises if you get one. And winning a title like that was a surprise. And Teddy getting featured like he did was another new thing that the fans loved. So he checked a lot of boxes, did the soon-to-be $1 Million Man. And I think a lot of that was just because he had such a great rapport with Sam Muchnick, who then in turn helped build that rapport with Vince McMahon Sr., and off they went. About that same time, Conrad, somebody will probably correct us on this, and that's fine. They were looking at getting younger in the WWF. That was about the time that Eddie Gilbert got a shot up there, somewhere in that ballpark. So they were in the process of trying to get younger, and both those guys, ironically, were second generation guys, and that meant something in those days. It should mean more today, quite frankly. Maybe it does. Maybe I'm being cynical. So nonetheless, Teddy was connected. It's again like being in that nonviolent mafia. He had people with already established made men, shall we say, that were in his corner. So he came at the right place, the right time, with the right benefactors.
How about this for a fun little bit of trivia? His last match in the WWF was losing to Hulk Hogan in Hulk Hogan's Madison Square Garden debut appearance, December 17th, 1979. Of course, we know a handful of years later, these guys are going to be working all over the place together. Once Ted leaves the WWF, he goes back to Mid-South. And
Conrad, I want to say, excuse me, I want to say that here's how you can judge how much credibility and the plans were for Ted DiBiase, because Hogan was the anointed guy.
Yes.
Hogan was going to come in and be the greatest, and arguably he was. So for you to have book a heel against Hogan, or book him against whatever the role may be, was pretty prestigious. So in other words, the company had great faith that Teddy would do everything he needed to do to get Hulk over and shine, and because they had that respect and the abilities of Ted DiBiase. So even there, that young, being booked in that way with Hogan's MSG debut was pretty significant.
It is. And we know they're going to become much bigger stars down the road. But first, Teddy's going to go, as you would say, learn a new hold. He's going to start bouncing between Bill Watts, St. Louis, down to Georgia Championship Wrestling, and even do several tours for All Japan. How important do you think? And of course, we don't see this as often these days because the territory system doesn't really exist. I mean, there are certain independents that, have a certain fanfare and following, but it's not quite the same. Georgia, you're getting to be on TBS. Of course, you're making a lot of towns and working in front of the same folks for Bill Watts territory. St. Louis has its own cachet because of the NWA history and legacy. But then All Japan, man, a lot of wrestlers, especially in the 80s, their goal was to get to Japan because it usually meant bigger crowds, but more importantly, bigger paydays.
More money.
This was important to the evolution of him as an in-ring performer, to be able to make his name and cut his teeth in Mid-South and Central States and St. Louis and New York and All Japan. We don't see that anymore. How critical do you think that was for Teddy's success?
Oh, it was everything. Everything. The other thing about Japan in that era, Conrad, was that it was before the days of territory guaranteeing monies. So when you went to Japan, you knew exactly what you were going to make. And there was never any issues. I'd never heard of an issue from a Japanese office, specifically All Japan or New Japan, on a payroll. They made a deal before you got there. Here's what you're going to earn. When you leave, here's what you're going to get. And it was guaranteed. And that was something that they wanted in the territories in the States, but they didn't have the option to to make that happen. But the key thing, I think, Conrad, is DiBiase got to wrestle the best talents in the world in his formative years. And I think that, as much as anything, helped his success. He just, when the Japanese people, they loved him.
Yeah.
And he got over so big in Japan, especially in tag matches. He was a tag team partner of Stan Hansen.
Yep.
There's that West Texas thing coming back full circle. And so, and other guys, but he wrestled the top guys in top programs. Again, taken under the wing of Stan Hansen. Hansen was one of the biggest stars in the entire country at that time. So, big money, great opponents, straightforward pro wrestling. It's pretty cool. So Teddy learned so much in those environments. And then he'd go to Georgia, as you mentioned, and he would work with top guys. So all that top guy experience was crucial to the success of Ted DiBiase.
Well said. He's going to be wrestling everybody. You mentioned top guys. Well, how about Ric Flair? How about Paul Orndorff? How about Dick Murdoch? How about the Freebirds? As you mentioned, him and Stan Hansen, a regular team over in Japan. And he's considered he's starting to become one of the best wrestlers in the world. And it's even in the Observer where Dave Meltzer writes this: if Ric Flair hadn't existed, he'd have almost surely gotten it, talking about Ted DiBiase becoming the NWA champion. In 81, when it was time for Harley Race to lose it, the plan was for Dusty Rhodes to get a short run, followed by rotating with Flair and DiBiase, with the idea of recreating Funk Jr. and Briscoe. But Flair ended up doing so well as champion, and the politics of the NWA changed, with the people who may have supported DiBiase, meaning Sam Mushnick and the Funks, no longer wielding the power, and Jim Crockett and Jim Barnett, both strong Flair supporters, being major influences. Plus, for Fritz von Erich, when it came to what he was doing with his sons as challengers, Flair was clearly a better fit than DiBiase would have been. This is one of the most talked about subjects among wrestling fans. Who's the best wrestler to never be world champion? And Ted DiBiase comes up time and time again in that conversation. But I think Dave does a great job sort of laying out what the politics of that was in that era. Could you have seen Ted DiBiase as the NWA champion? Had Flair not existed, would he have been the logical choice?
Well, even with Flair existing, he was a great option. And if you're an NWA guy and you're a fan of that title, you can't be mad at the fact that Ted DiBiase may be that guy at some point in time. I certainly not denigrating Nature's run, because
Right.
that's silly. Nothing to denigrate. But when your guy needs some time off and heal some injuries or repair some marriages or whatever the hell it may be, it could be a lot of things for all of us, then that wouldn't have been a bad stand-in. And then you'd have seen how good Teddy was going to be, and with all the stuff that he'd learned throughout the country. He already had a big track record in Japan, so the NWA champion in Japan was a big deal. So he already crossed that hurdle. So I think he would have done great, Conrad. And it'd been a good relief for Rick to be able to step away for a little while and recharge his batteries without a huge drop down in performance levels. Teddy was going to be different than Nate, not as much charisma, not as much sizzle, but he still would deliver adequate steak.
Yes.
And would be and reliable. Again, he had godfathers he had to answer to: McMahon, Muchnick, Watts. So Teddy was smart about who he surrounded himself with, and those guys then took made a personal investment in Ted, and all of a sudden, he's getting help from a higher source, shall we say, in wrestling.
Now, one of the things that everybody talks about when they talk about the NWA champion is the incredible touring schedule and just how grueling that could be. Famously, Jack Briscoe decided he wanted to drop the belt as soon as possible. He was tired of living out of suitcases, waking up in hotels and not really being sure where he was, and supposedly was so anxious to get rid of this way of life that once he relieves himself of the NWA title, he takes his watch and throws it in the water there in Tampa off a bridge. Like, I don't need this anymore. I have nowhere to be. I'm going to do what I want to do. That travel was just a grind. Do you think Ted DiBiase, being a young, good looking guy, he'd have loved that, would he not?
I would think,
Yeah.
at least for a while.
Yeah.
You know, you got to be your book. If you're booked properly, in the eyes of some, you will work every day. There's, Saturday nights, Sundays, that some of those towns at midweek had regular nights. Tulsa was on Monday. I don't know what night Tampa ran, but they all had their night. So it was easy to book them, book your champion. And then it was a interesting environment, to say the least. And but I think Teddy would have made a good maybe great NWA champion. But he certainly had the skill set and the integrity. He was reliable. He could work babyface or heel. Young, so fresh. So I think he could, I don't see any reason. Now, would he have been as good as Flair? That's impossible to say. Probably not.
Right.
Because who was? And that's not a knock on Teddy. But I think that he'd have done a hell of a job in that regard.
I think he did a great job with the character that he was and he's going to become, but it is fun to think about him being the touring NWA champion. And hey, maybe you're thinking in this new year, you want to get out and start touring a little bit. Hit the open road with our friends at Camper Max. If one of your New Year's resolutions is to travel more, maybe another is to spend more time with family, what a great way to get the family together, make some new memories out on the open road with our friends at Camper Max. That's campermax.com, CAMPERMAXX.com. There's 2 X's in campermax.com. They're specializing in max discounted pricing on travel trailers and fifth wheel RVs. Here's what's cool about Camper Max. They'll deliver anywhere in the lower 48. That's right. You can go ahead and select what you want to make these new memories in from your office, your cell phone, or even your couch. It's at campermax.com. Why not click or call and find out how easy it is to start enjoying the RVing lifestyle? Well, how easy is it? Well, the Camper Max discount will fit any budget. Offering easy financing with extended terms. It really is just too easy. Visit campermax.com or give them a call at 256-320-7033. And be sure to let them know that Conrad sent you. I've been personal friends with Brad Wagner and his family for a long, long time. And if you've heard of my crew showing up at a convention or a pay-per-view in an RV, it's because my man Rod hooked it up, and he'd be glad to hook you up. Just let them know that I sent you. Campermax.com. You're going to get that friend of a friend deal. And if you're looking to purchase a motorhome, hang in there. My buddy Rod is working on that now. Campermax.com. So listen, let's talk about the next new wrinkle. You and I have talked a lot about Ernie Ladd, the big cat, here on the program before, but in 1982, he's the booker for Mid-South.
Right.
He asked Ted DiBiase for a favor. Since Ted has basically been bouncing all around the country, working in St. Louis and Georgia and even all Japan. Hey, Teddy, the old big cat says, could you keep an eye out for who could be a new hot heel that we could use here in Mid-South? Teddy agrees. And comes to Ladd a few days later and says, hey, I figured it out. Here's your next big heel. It's me.
You're looking at him. So that's how that went. He told Ernie, you're looking at him. Ernie almost did number 2. He hadn't thought of it. And Teddy was so established as a babyface.
There you go.
It's just an automatic transition as a heel. You just have a different agenda. That's well explained, and so they felt like they had a great story. That's probably one of the best TV angles I've ever been a part of. Was the Flair, DiBiase, Murdoch, scenario that had other movable parts, but it was just really good planning, and it was dramatic. It was, heavy juice, but at that time the juice wasn't just gratuitous. It was needed in that extreme environment, and I love this angle. It was, like I said, I don't think I've ever done anything as much fun in a territory as that angle with those guys that Watts put together, Watts and Ernie.
I think most of our listeners are familiar or first became familiar with Ted DiBiase. It's probably as a heel, but imagine, I mean, at this point, DiBiase had only ever been a babyface. So it would be akin to a Sting or a Ricky Morton or a Ricky the Dragon Steamboat saying, "Hey, I want to be a heel."
Right.
What? No, you've never been a heel. You are a babyface. But DiBiase, boy, that guy can sell. He convinced Ernie Ladd to give it a go. And this began a new and exciting chapter of Ted DiBiase's career. And as you mentioned, one of the most memorable moments in Mid-South history is when he turned heel against the Junkyard Dog and even captures the North American heavyweight title from JYD in June of '82. And there's a stipulation that DiBiase would leave the territory if he lost. It's a babyface versus babyface match. And just to remind everybody, JYD is the top babyface in the entire territory.
Maybe in the entire country.
Yes.
Seriously. I know I'm biased because I worked there and all that. But you look at it for where JYD was positioned and where he was accepted, was territory that a black babyface had never traveled. And he, more than carried his share of the water, as the old saying goes. But dog was the dog, and there was nobody like him. And so Cowboy and Ernie made the decision, if you're going to turn DiBiase heel, you turn him against the top guy in the territory. You make it mean something. And boy, they certainly made it mean something. That was a white hot angle. DiBiase, I've never seen a heel that had, I mean, it was dangerous heat. It was just people being silly and stupid, bringing guns to the shows and slashing tires and doing all kinds of bullshit. But that's because they love the dog, as they should a babyface. And Teddy became the dog's most untrusted, hurtful, violent adversary that JY had ever had.
It's super fun to think about, how this was pulled off. JYD gets a near fall with a power slam. DiBiase goes for the figure 4. Dog kicks him over the top, which was not disqualification here in this no DQ match. And JYD goes out to check on him, helps him back inside the ring. But that's when DiBiase reaches in his tights, loads up his glove, nails the dog, who sells it like death, and DiBiase pins him to win the title. And the crowd just sort of gasps and sits there in almost disgusted silence of what they had just witnessed, because nobody ever imagined that after JYD was helping DiBiase, two baby faces like this, that he would dare turn, but he did. Another hot angle that DiBiase has in Mid-South is with our old pal Hacksaw Jim Duggan. And at one point, they were the closest of friends, part of the Rat Pack faction. And in 1983, all that changed. DiBiase made a deal to take on General Skandar Akbar as his manager. And as the big cheese of the Rat Pack, Duggan had committed some pretty diabolical deeds. But joining forces with the anti-American Akbar crossed the line by insulting Duggan's renowned patriotism. And DiBiase insisted that his dealings with Akbar would not affect his relationship with Duggan. And then, of course, at Akbar's behest, DiBiase sells out Duggan at the very first opportunity. And this leads to one of the most violent and exciting feuds of 1983. This is Mid-South maybe at its best in this era, 82, 83, is it not?
Oh, yeah, it was. So we had, look at the talent. So, my God, Watson assembled an all-star team.
Yes.
And that's what, over the years, motivated me to get quality athletic depth in that dressing room. I saw what it could do if you had you want some depth. There are NFL teams that wish they had more depth at quarterback, and some of them are falling by the wayside because they don't. So same deal. The more quality talents you have in your locker room, the better off you are. Yeah, I think. Did we talk about the angle with Murdoch and Flair? Are we going to talk about that?
Sure, go ahead.
Well, I mean, that was the one that I thought was the best thing I'd ever seen in a little territory TV 1 hour TV show. Murdoch was everybody. It was all about the championship, and the champion was Ric Flair.
Right.
And the irony of that story is that Cowboy was never a member of the NWA. Now, Leroy was back in the early days, and Watts would accompany him to the alliance meetings in Vegas. So that's where they would select the champion and talk about other business and other problems and things of that nature. Nobody gave up a lot because they're all greedy, and nobody wanted to give the other any kind of advantage. But I think that the DiBiase group, everything that he touched was really working, and he just got over as a son of a gun, amazingly well. But he had this angle with Flair. A lot of fans will probably remember. If you don't go back and find it on YouTube or something, or maybe in someplace else. Hell, I don't know. I'm not that up on that stuff. But it exists. The angle exists. I wholeheartedly encourage you to watch it because it had different layers, and it had a way to feature multiple talents on a fairly even plane, which is very hard to do. And these guys are also unselfish. They knew that if this thing clicked, which they all believed that it would, Cowboy was booking it with Ernie, two of the greatest minds ever in territory wrestling ever. And so let's see how it works out. So that's where I was in that deal. It was some of the most compelling television. It was coarse. It was gruesome at times. It was real, believable. The story had no holes. The story was basically based, Cowboy was good about booking things, and most good bookers are something that comes out of the 7 deadly sins. And that could include jealousy. And this angle was, I think, primarily built on jealousy. And everybody can relate to jealousy to some extreme or another.
Sure.
So it was an interesting scenario that was real in theory. And the jealousy was the culprit.
Boy, that the blood in that match you're talking about with Flair. I mean, they were known for bloodbaths in this era, and it's something to go out of your way to see. I actually just retweeted a clip from that match.
Attaboy.
Mid-South, well remembered for the Cowboy stories where he would come back in the ring, but Duggan and DiBiase is one of the biggest pieces of business you guys did, and I think the feud comes to a shocking end in June of '83 when Hacksaw defeats Ted DiBiase in a loser leaves Mid-South match. And Ted is leaving a promotion here that he had pretty much dominated for the last few years.
Right.
In the fall of '84, he comes back to Mid-South in a pretty shocking manner. He's going to assault Duggan in the parking lot of the Irish McNeil Boys Club before Duggan's football helmet match against Dr. Death Steve Williams. And what do you know? We're back at it, and the feud is going to build for months, culminating in famous gimmick matches, a loser leaves town, a tuxedo, a coal miner's glove on a pole, a steel cage match, all rolled into one. And Duggan comes out on top in every town they ran. This is sort of gimmick overload, and we've seen bookers at times be criticized for relying on gimmicks. We're sort of throwing it all into one here, but people loved it. What did you think of this execution of what if we just did them all at once?
I wasn't really crazy about it. All at once to me was it was overpackaged.
Yeah.
I think you could have done away with some of those stipulations and either work to them later on or not. But to have so many things included in in this, so many stipulations included in this match, I thought was a little bit of an overkill. But the bottom line is there an ass every 18 inches, which
There
is
you go.
which is the width of a chair, and more often than not there was. Those guys, just the violence of it, the gruesomeness of it, the physicality of it, the fact that both guys are really over, both guys were respected, both guys were looked at as tough guys, and so I love the marriage of DiBiase and Duggan. I did. They had great chemistry. They liked each other. They traveled together. They teamed together. They were just young in the business, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. So I liked that marriage. I just thought that one thing might be too much. And how I told Cowboy that story was that, I'm doing a lot of those the breaks in the show where you're hawking a live event.
Local interviews, local promos.
Yeah, all that. I did everything in that respect because that was my job, man.
Right.
So I would just go along and do these promos, and I'm having trouble because there's so much verbiage that goes into this one match, and it was hard to sell.
Right.
And so that was what I based my argument on, which did fall upon deaf ears. Thanks for coming, kid. Hold my beer, type deal. Right. So he didn't relent. He's going with it. So, and that's the way of a lot of bookers. They're hell bent on getting their idea over and that thing. And this may have been a situation. I wouldn't be surprised if this wasn't the case, where Ernie had one theory on that stipulation argument and Cowboy had another. And of course, guess who won? The big Cowboy. So that's also not a surprise. And Ernie knew that. So I thought it might have been a little bit of overload, Connie, but did it move the needle in that respect? Am I liking it or not? No, not a bit.
Well, we know that eventually DiBiase is going to leave Mid-South and look for greener pastures. He winds up finding him in the WWF, but it's reported at the time that Ted was actually pretty deep in negotiations with Jim Crockett Promotions. This comes after Crockett had purchased the UWF territory, and the story is that he is recruited by Vince McMahon and goes up, takes the wife, meets with the family. And as the legend goes, when Vince leaves the bathroom or leaves the meeting, Pat Patterson turns to him and says, "If you come in, the gimmick that Vince has for you is the gimmick he would give himself." But they wouldn't tell DiBiase what the gimmick was, and you just had to trust him. But when Patterson allegedly says, "This is the gimmick that Vince would give himself," DiBiase thinks about it and decides, damn the JCP idea. I need to go work for Vince. And you just said that's true. You've heard that same story?
Oh, yeah. Vince has always wanted to be a wrestler. Hence all the stuff he did in the Attitude Era where he was taking bumps and taking stunners and bleeding and this, that, and the other. He's always wanted to be a wrestler. I think his favorite guy was one of the Grahams. Jerry Graham or one of those Grahams, because I remember Vince telling me that on a Wild Hair he bleached his hair and to look like one of the Grahams, and
Dr. Jerry Graham, who
Dr. Jerry,
would famously light his cigars with $100 bills.
Yeah, a little eccentric.
Yeah,
but he impressed Vince. He had had a cool car and had the cool hair, cool clothes, etc., etc. This overall cool to a guy of Vince's age group. So then Vince decided to bleach his hair, and that didn't go over real well with his dad, because his dad never wanted Vince to be in the ring, ever, ever, ever. And so he's trying to push him back away from that. And I think that's how one of the reasons that Vince got so involved in the commentary. He finally got a role. He got cast, and in a role that he was very involved in and good at, quite frankly. So, it was a unique scenario, to say the least. But that story of Vince himself was the role model for the $1 Million Man. And And then when you look at it, it makes all the sense in the world.
Yeah.
You know, it was just logical. Narcissistic, rich, a guy that could back it up. That's what Vince wanted for himself. He couldn't do it, so he put that whole package together for Teddy, and he did it real well.
Of course, we know you're not in the WWF at the time. You're going to go join JCP as a part of this sale. You're a big part of that sale, and that's a story for another time. But I do want to ask about, from your perspective, did you think Teddy was making a mistake? Or were you selfishly wishing that Teddy would have come along and been a part of what you guys were going to do together now that JCP and Watts were going to be under one umbrella?
I was hoping Teddy would get on this team, the team that I was on, because I knew what we had.
Right.
There was no mystery about what kind of an asset that Ted DiBiase brought to the table. And, you know, good in matches every night. He could enhance talents that were not as good as him and raise their game. So, and I liked him. You know, Teddy and I were friends. My God, we started out essentially together in our early 20s for Leroy and Cowboy. That was funny. The jobs, we don't even talk about it. Yeah, I was working for Leroy then, and then I went to work for Cowboy.
Yes, it's hilarious.
It's just crazy. It's pro wrestling. So, and I'm sure glad I got to live through it, man. That was a hell of a time, hell of a ride. When I look back on it, it's exceptional. For me, I got lucky. So, anyhow, Teddy. If Crockett could have got Teddy, we might have found out the answer to that topic we talked about earlier, and DiBiase being the NWA champion. I can't imagine him being in that territory. I mean, you always got to book ahead, and you know you got your star who's Flair, and he's the champ. He's one injury away from everything being turned upside down, much like Magnum TA's deal.
Right.
You know, Magnum would have been the NWA champion at some point in time, in my opinion.
No, for sure.
Because he got over and he was young and he could wrestle. And he was reliable, and he was a student of the game. So I think that Teddy coming to Crockett would have been a huge get for Jimmy and the Crockett family. But I also understand Teddy's decision. Here's the thing. If anybody that knows Vince or knows of Vince knows he's not going to create a character in his image that he's going to allow to fail. Not going to happen. So I think, and Teddy made the right decision. Teddy made a lot of money there in WWF.
Oh yeah,
for a long time, consistent money, and that's what all talents are looking for: is consistent money, and he was getting it there.
It's amazing to think about what that could have looked like. Of course, by 1987, when all this happens, the Horsemen are well established. Everybody knows about the Horsemen, but we are looking for opponents. And the big star that winds up sort of breaking out of the pack wasn't Dr. Death. It wound up being Sting.
Right.
And Sting is going to become a made man in 1988 and never looks back. But it is interesting to think, boy, if DiBiase is a part of that crew, does he have a career that looks more like Ted DiBiase or more like Sting? But what he was in store for is the push of a lifetime and a gimmick that resonates to this day and people still remember so fondly. So it's hard to argue he made the wrong choice.
I don't think so. I think he made the right choice, quite frankly. Again, selfishly, I wish he'd have made the other choice.
Right.
Because we get a great guy in the locker room. We get a hell of a talent, a hell of a hand, no doubt. So my team that I'm on, getting paid by, would have got a big win. But Teddy made the right call. I mean, he made the right call. Like I said, if you know Vince as well as I do, well, not many people know Vince as well as I do. But if you understand the Mr. McMahon's personality, he's not going to allow failure in this $1 million man gimmick. He's just not going to let it happen. And you can say that with confidence when you have a talent like DiBiase who has this much skill. He can carry the load. He can load the wagon, don't worry about the mules type scenario. So Teddy made the right call without a doubt. To me, it's not even close.
I would totally agree. And I'll tell you this, it's not even close who has the best crab cakes in the world. And you don't have to be the $1 Million Man to enjoy Jimmy's famous seafood. How about this, y'all? You've heard us bragging about Jimmy's for years here on the program. Now they're a sponsor. We've negotiated a deal that I think is worth bragging about. As somebody who has ordered Jimmy's for a long time, I can tell you the tough part is when you have to pay for the shipping. Because you got fresh seafood, you don't want it sitting in some doggone warehouse or on a truck. You want it from them to you as fast as you can get it. But that gets expensive. Until now. With our promo code, you can get free 2-day nationwide shipping on orders over $125. Let me repeat that. Jimmy's Famous Seafood is shipping food nationwide. And you can get it delivered free with our promo code Jim Ross. What are you going to get? The best crab cakes in the world! The soups, the chowders, the oysters, the signature steaks, plus desserts and gluten-free items. Maybe this is something that you can give as a gift too. Maybe bring the best crab cakes in the world and put it on somebody else's front porch. The famous gift box will make it happen. They got 4 of the world's best colossal Maryland crab cakes, 2 different crab soups, crab dip, seafood seasoning, and their signature bay sauce, or the tailgate bundle, just in time for these NFL playoffs. You got 2 pounds of wings, a full rack of ribs, a pint of crab dip, the crab cake mix, or create your own package. It's been a part of my life for a long, long time, and it will be yours too. I'm telling you, it will ruin you. You'll never order crab cakes anywhere else when you go out to dinner. These folks do it right. It's a family-owned business. I know the family. I love the family. You will too. They've been in business for more than 4 decades. They've been on every sort of food television show there is. If Bobby Flay or Guy Fieri are in it, so was Jimmy's Famous Seafood. I don't think it gets any better, man. You've been using Jimmy's Famous Seafood for a long time. The crab balls, the crab dip, the soups. What's your go-to, Jim?
Well, the crab cakes, of course, sets the top of the list. But the sleeper to me, and I'm a soup fanatic, I'm a soup snob. Their soups are hard to explain how good they are. They might be considered orgasmic.
Oh,
they're just amazing, absolutely. And one of the reasons that their stuff is so good, they've been doing it forever.
yes.
You know, the dad started it.
Yep.
Back in the day. It's truly family run.
Yes.
The kitchen and the front of the house and the kitchen, you're going to see family when you go there.
Yes.
It's the coolest thing in the world, man. I just love their food, love the family. I don't know the last time that I went to Baltimore that I didn't go to Jimmy's.
Correct.
It's almost like it's a part of your trip.
Required.
Yeah. So, but I love it. You'll love it too, folks. I promise you. It brings back great memories to me because that was one of Jan and my favorite meals. We didn't order a lot of food because she was such a great cook to have shipped in. But, the crab cakes, and I mentioned this on the show, her little trick was finishing them off in the oven under the broiler.
Yes.
For the last 2 or 3 minutes. It gets that little charred effect on them, and golly, it's just heaven. So check them out, folks. The free shipping that's a good deal to this amazing product. And Conrad and I, look at us. Do we look like we don't know how to eat?
We know.
Brothers know how to eat.
Yeah, buddy.
So anyway, enjoy it. Give it a shot and see how much you'll see how much we're right on the money. This is not a guess. I think you're going to like it. No,
we know.
Love it.
Yes. Jimmy'sFamousSeafood.com. Use that promo code Jim Ross. Let's talk a little bit more about the $1 Million Man here. You know, this gimmick itself has been discussed and debated forever and ever and ever as being one of the most prolific gimmicks in wrestling history. Now, we say that with the benefit of hindsight, but I could see how if you just saw it the first time and maybe you had seen what Ted DiBiase was like as a heel and what Ted DiBiase was like in Mid-South. What did you think of the presentation first time you saw it?
Of the $1 Million Man?
Yes.
Yeah, I loved it. That's Vince.
Yes.
That's Vince inside Ted DiBiase's body and inside his mind. And then to make matters even better, is that Teddy took ownership of that persona simply because he didn't create it for himself. He worked just as hard, as diligent, to make sure that he could capture some of the nuances and add to it, suggest things creatively. Again, you got to remember that Teddy has never not been around creative wrestling people.
Right.
All those names we mentioned, like a who's who, that was Teddy's upbringing. And so he knew it was imperative for him to keep that character fresh and to come up. Everybody else outside his orbit cannot be the only people contributing to the creative. And so he was really good about that and adding to the persona of the $1 Million Man. So I loved it, man. I thought it was just big money. It's one of those segments where it's a non-wrestling segment on the wrestling show, but it doesn't seem out of place.
There you go.
It fit, and boy, to me, it fit from day one.
Yeah, man, I loved it as a kid. I could look at it now and I could say as an adult, and again, you have to appreciate, you create characters and moments and matches and all of that for the time and the audience you're in front of. So in 1987, 1988, this was amazing to a young person like myself. But now I could say, all right, well, the dollar signs on the lapel, that's a little hokey. The dollar sign on the back, that's a little silly. The $1 million belt, that's a little silly. But as a kid, man, this was the coolest thing ever. And what made it even more real is Vince wanted DiBiase to quote unquote live the gimmick. We've heard of guys like The Undertaker who were masters at this, and they would always, maybe they're not wearing the Undertaker costume to the gas station, but they are in all black. Yeah. And it looks as if, oh, wow, that's the Undertaker. You don't have to see him in the context of the WWE. Well, the $1 Million Man is going to fly first class everywhere. He's going to be driven around in limousines. He's going to be given wads of hundreds just to pass out. And this has to be something that other guys in the locker room are looking at and saying, wait a minute, what the hell? I'm a fighting chicken. I want to be that guy.
Yeah.
But Ted went, he more than does his part. The laugh, the title, the style, the presentation. This is the push and gimmick of a lifetime. And I still think you could argue that this is one of the most famous gimmicks in wrestling history. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. Because it had tenure. It had legs. It had legs. It was gimmicky. But also you got to remember, Conrad, regarding those dollar signs on the lapels and etc., of the era that it was in.
Yes.
It wasn't as realistically portrayed as some angles are attempted to be today.
Yes.
And so that's another thing. We got to take consideration the time and the place. But yeah, it was, I don't know if I can think of off the top of my head a better created gimmick than the $1 Million Man. It's top of the list to me because it lasted, and it lasted on top, and it lasted through several incarnations of different bookings and matches. So it was just right place, right time, and it lasted, and which is to me the deciding factor. It wasn't a one-hit wonder. It wasn't catching lightning in a bottle. It was real. It was everlasting, and it had great legs. And I'm not so sure even when it ended, it didn't have more legs.
Yeah, correct. I would agree. And what's fascinating to think too is just how different this character and presentation is to what we had seen in Ted DiBiase's previous work in Mid-South. And I'm sure there was a contingent of folks on the Mid-South side of things and Jim Crockett alumni who would look at the WWF presentation and say, oh, that's cartoony. We do the real wrestling. But when you see a gimmick like this, it sort of breaks through all of that. I mean, he becomes almost like a movie character, and it's not just him. He has an ensemble cast, if you will. He gets a bodyguard, and they name him Virgil. Of course, that's a rib on Dusty Rhodes' real name. He has I don't know another way to describe it than to say a tremendous 6-year run with this gimmick as an in-ring wrestler.
Yep.
He's immediately pushed. He's saying he's going to buy the WWF title from Hulk Hogan. He's going to be heavily involved in the most watched wrestling match of all time at that point, the main event in February of '88. It's on NBC. It's Hulk Hogan versus Andre, and it's the time we see what I still believe might be one of the best angles in wrestling history. Again, it feels like a movie. The twin referee angle.
Yeah.
The execution of this was fantastic, was it not?
Yeah, it's pretty cool. Pretty cool. And I'd never seen anything like that before. Hell, I didn't even know the Hebners are twins.
Yeah.
I casually knew who the Hebners were, but I never put together that they were twins, because I was not around when Dave refereed that much. Earl was the referee of the family in that respect, even though Dave was a good referee. But Dave was working when I got to the WWF. Dave was working as an agent, and making payoffs and draws and handling the box office and things of that nature. So, but it was a fresh angle to me. I'd never heard of dueling twin evil refs, and I thought it was just really well planned out. I don't know whose idea that was, Patterson or Vince, I'm guessing, but it was a good one.
It's a fantastic idea. And just to add context, because I realize that a lot of the 80s just sort of get swished together when we think about it in hindsight. But 1987 is the high watermark for the WWF. Their brand was never bigger than on the heels of WrestleMania 3. They became a giant touring opportunity. They went from having one touring show to 2 to 3. They had A, B, and C crews out here. The WWF was in higher demand than ever before. And right in the middle of that is when we introduced the $1 Million Man character. And we ride that all the way to WrestleMania 4. And along the way, set a record with Hulk and Andre on NBC and this twin referee. And DiBiase's in the middle of it every step of the way. And he's even involved in the main event of WrestleMania. Think about that. His first WrestleMania, and he's going on last with the Macho Man Randy Savage. They're going to crown a new world champion. Of course, Randy Savage gets the win. But now he's on top doing this house show run with Randy Savage for the next 6 months afterwards. And again, context is king. Hulk Hogan is away making a movie. So historically, no matter where you are on the card, you want to work with Hogan. That's how you're going to make your most money. But when it's time for Hogan to take a leave of absence, if you will, and go work on the movie, they relied heavily on Macho Man and this brand new character, the $1 Million Man. DiBiase walked into the job of a lifetime here, and he just hit it out of the park, did he not?
Yeah, that's why there's no debate on did he make the right decision going to Crockett or coming in to work for Vince. I mean, it's not even a good argument, quite frankly. He made the right call, and he knew that Vince had huge plans for the gimmick, for the $1 Million Man gimmick, because it was Vince and another guy's body, and he wasn't going to let that fail. He just wasn't. And Teddy made sure it didn't fail.
And let's also say this, the knock on the WWF had been for a while. Yeah. I know they're bigger stars, but we have better matches here in the NWA. They don't really wrestle. We really wrestle. And that was a knock against the showmanship of a Hulk Hogan or maybe a Bruno Sammartino or whatever. But when it comes down to an actual main event world title match, Randy Savage and Ted DiBiase, that's something you could put up against any main event anywhere in the country, no?
I think so. Yeah. Skill set wise, absolutely.
Yes.
There's not a booker in the country that wouldn't like to have those guys in their territory and be able to use them. So, that's a no-brainer. That was good booking. It maximized the minutes of the talents in the best way suited for their skill set. And there was very little limitations, if any, between Ted and Randy. They just both are really, really good.
Let me ask you this. In your opinion, the WWF had obviously been a babyface territory for a long, long time. Going back to Bruno, that was the idea. You have this huge babyface hero, and then you just create, for lack of a better word, a heel factory.
Yeah, I like that, by the way.
Yeah, we tried that with Bob Backlund. Maybe it didn't work as well. We have an interim champion in the Iron Sheik, but then it works fantastic. I mean, better than ever before. Maybe Hogan is the ultimate example of a babyface champion in a heel factory. But the other show has a heel champion in Ric Flair and babyfaces chasing. We know that they went with the Macho Man. do you think it could have worked had they made another decision? And instead of stretching out the Macho Man and Hulk Hogan, they stretched out Hulk Hogan and Ted DiBiase. Ted couldn't ever buy the title off of Hulk Hogan. What if he does cheat somehow and wins the tournament? He becomes the champion at WrestleMania 4, and then ultimately he drops it to Hogan at WrestleMania 5. I love what we got, but I could have seen that work.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, it would have worked. It would have worked very well. Teddy was ready for that role or any other role. He was a main event guy. Heel or babyface, no matter what color jersey he was wearing, he's a main event guy. And so yeah, it would have worked that way. No, not to say the other way didn't work, it did. But if you have another viable option, and you do or you did, then why not give it a shot? It just never came around for Ted in that respect.
After he finishes up the feud with Randy Savage, he's going to have some pretty high profile feuds with Jake the Snake Roberts, Dusty Rhodes, and Virgil, including the big split here with Virgil. And his run on top really isn't as long as it feels like he was. Once he's done with Savage and Hogan, he slides down the card a little bit, but still very memorable moments and feuds with these characters. And he even gets Sensational Sherry as his manager for about a year here before he and IRS are put together as a tag team to form Money Inc. And they become the WWF Tag Team Champions almost immediately in February of 92. And in doing so, they defeat the Legion of Doom. And it ends up being a big role, of course, because when 93 comes around and Hulk comes back, it's at WrestleMania where we'll see finally DiBiase against Hogan at a WrestleMania, but this time it'll be in a tag affair with IRS and Brutus Beefcake tagging along. And of course, it's your first show. This is your first time working with DiBiase since Mid-South. Was it good to reconnect with Teddy at WrestleMania 9?
Oh yeah, great friends are hard to come by in any walk of life. That's why you value them, you embrace them. Friendships are hard to create, hard to be a part of. So Teddy and I have always been friends. And but his game hadn't changed. He just got better. Still the same fundamentally sound, fundamentals, psychology, same Ted. And so it was great to see him again. It was great to call his matches. It was just like old times.
His last WWF match winds up being that SummerSlam 93. He loses to Razor Ramon, and DiBiase is going to step away from the WWF for a while. And DiBiase, of course, has publicly talked about his struggles of being on the road at the time and the effect it was having on his personal life at home. And that's something a lot of guys have to reconcile. And it's a famous story that we've heard from a variety of different characters. Was it a combination of injuries and living on the road that you think led him to making this decision? Or was it more to it than that?
I think you hit the nail on the head. It was a combination of things. Teddy's body had taken a beating because Teddy was a great bumper. Teddy could probably feed a comeback for a baby face as good as anybody that I can recall. So I think it was a combination of things. His body started to tap him on the shoulder that, hey, we need to tweak a few things. I also think that it was the fact that he had two sons, and he wasn't seeing them much, and he's a good father. And so I think he just got burned out, Connie. I think that's what it was. I think he got burned out of the lifestyle of the wrestlers. He had probably not lived the ideal parenting life like a lot of the boys, and he needed to step away from that. He needed to change, or lose his marriage and lose access to raising his two sons. And he didn't want to do that. Who would want to do that? So he took the only route he thought was available, and that would be to step away for a while and recharge his batteries and reset the engine.
I want to talk about something that might make us a little uncomfortable. But before I do, I want to talk about something that you and I both know is not uncomfortable at all. As a matter of fact, it's easy. I'm talking about athletic greens. My wife and I first started using AG1 at the start of the pandemic. She had done her research and she wanted us to optimize our immune system. We're still using it to this day because we've enjoyed better gut health. And I like a supplement that actually tastes great. My wife even says she's got more energy. So what is this stuff? Well, with one delicious scoop of AG1, you're absorbing 75 high-quality vitamins, minerals, whole food source superfoods, probiotics, and adaptogens, all to help you start your day right. It's a special blend of ingredients that'll help you support your gut health, your nervous system, your immune system, your energy, your focus, your recovery, your aging, all of the things. It's also lifestyle friendly. Whether you're trying to eat keto or paleo or vegan or dairy-free or gluten-free, it has less than 1 gram of sugar, no GMOs, no nasty chemicals, no artificial anything, and it still tastes good. It'll support better sleep quality and recovery, better mental clarity and alertness. Think of it as like your all-in-one nutritional insurance. And Jim and I really believe in it. A, because we've used it, but B, because they got over 7,000 5-star reviews, y'all. Come on.
That's amazing.
Right now, it's time to reclaim your health. Arm your immune system with convenient daily nutrition. It's just 1 scoop in a cup of water every day. That's it. No need for a million different pills and supplements to look out for your health. And to make it easy, Athletic Greens is going to give you a free 1-year supply of immune-supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. All you got to do is visit athleticgreens.com/JR. Again, that's athleticgreens.com/JR to take ownership over your health and pick up the ultimate daily nutritional insurance.
Good stuff, man. Good stuff. Take care of your health. It's the most valuable asset that we have, our health, period. Take it from me on that one.
Listen, I want you to just try it. Just try it. See what you think. See how you feel. See how it tastes. You won't regret it. It's athleticgreens.com/JR. So, Jim, before the break, I said I want to talk about something that's a little uncomfortable. We don't normally talk about this sort of thing on the show, but Ted DiBiase has written books about it. He's talked about it in his documentary. He fell into the trappings on the road. Maybe he was dabbling in drugs. Maybe he was drinking too much, but he also met a few ladies along the way that he probably shouldn't have been spending time with.
He was a womanizer.
And he was a handsome, good-looking fellow, and he had a lot of success in that regard, but that is really not the life he was supposed to be living back at home. He had the family and the wife and the kids, and ultimately, he turns his life over to Jesus and becomes a born-again Christian, and it changed the course of his life forever. And oftentimes in wrestling, guys have done this sort of thing where they realize, hey man, I got to change. Something's got to give. And they become born again. And that's met with a lot of skepticism in wrestling. All of my dealings with Mr. DiBiase would lead me to think, man, I'm a true believer. He's walking the walk and talking the talk. Is that the vibe you always got from Ted DiBiase?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because I'm like everybody else. I was thinking, okay, when's the other shoe going to drop?
Yes.
When's Teddy going to go back to his philandering? You know, I don't know that Teddy was a huge, as far as drugs and alcohol. He would drink, but nothing abnormal within the confines of the business.
Right.
I never knew of him being a drug guy, as they say, but he loved the women, and that was his downfall, in my opinion. And that's what gave him the abrupt wake-up call that, hey, this shit's got to change. I'm going to lose everything I got, everything I've worked for, and the most important thing, my family, if I don't make some changes. So it's changes that were overdue, perhaps, but certainly changes that were necessary, and they were legitimate. He's still walking the walk today, as you said, Conrad. You know, Teddy hasn't changed since he's found the Lord. So it was real. It was real, because you're always waiting on that. Oh, there he is. Well, how's that religious thing working for you? You know, as he sits there with two ladies having a cocktail. No, it was never that way with him. He was very devout, and he still is.
30 years later, it really is a great story, and I would encourage everyone to go check out his documentary, go check out his book. They're phenomenal stories, and he's lived quite a life. But now that he's realized, hey man, I might need to step away from this, he actually tries a lighter schedule with All Japan in the fall of 93. But he's back home in the WWF. He returns to the company at the 1994 Royal Rumble. He's going to be working here as a color commentator for that show alongside Vince McMahon. And he's going to dabble in commentary for a few times.
It was his forte. I produced the talent that night at that show. I think that event was a pay-per-view in Providence. And I produced the announcers, which wasn't a lot to Vince. I get a line here or something I think he might like, but I helped Teddy a lot as best I could. He unfortunately didn't have the same aptitude for announcing as he did for wrestling.
Right.
And he wasn't a horrible, but he wasn't the hit that everybody hoped he would be with those pipes that he's got. And, and his reputation and so forth and so on. So in any place, he's, his skill was wrestling, not announcing, but this goes through the progression of what you try. Later on, we'll talk about him on the creative team. They kept looking for things for Teddy to do that he could contribute. So his respect within the office and those within the office was still very strong.
Well, here's what we know. Maybe he didn't have an equal in the ring, and maybe he wasn't cut out for commentary. We're going to try him as a manager, and he does great. He's going to run the $1 Million Corporation until 1996. So he's got 2 years here. He's going to start off with the likes of Nikolai Volkov and Bam Bam Bigelow. Then he's even going to bring in a fake Undertaker for SummerSlam 94 to headline against the real Undertaker. He's a great talker. I thought he added a lot to some guys who maybe didn't have that in their repertoire, so to speak. I don't know that I'll ever really associate him as being a manager. I'll still always remember him as being a wrestler, and maybe that hindered him a little bit, but I thought he did a phenomenal job with some really impressive moments. I mean, I know it's hokey to us now to look back at it, but if you were a little kid, Undertaker versus Undertaker, that was a pretty doggone cool.
I like that, actually. Yeah. I wasn't a little kid. I may have acted like a little kid more often than not. But I liked that presentation. I thought it was a creative idea. And again, you're always looking for one-off opponents for talents of the repute and of the lot in the wrestling life, like Taker. You're always looking for that next guy who's going to work with Taker. We see that at WrestleManias. Who's going to be the Taker's next victim, and is somebody going to come in and upset this great streak, which should never have been broken, by the way, in my opinion.
Sure.
This is my take. It happened. And if you're going to do it, I guess Lesnar's the guy to do it with.
Sure.
I'm not knocking him. It's just a matter of, I don't think it was necessary to beat Taker. That's just me. So anyway, continue on, young man.
Well, let's talk about, how high profile the Undertaker opportunity is. Of course, if he's going to wrestle a fake Undertaker, well, that fake Undertaker can't talk. We got to have somebody who can make it happen for the real Undertaker, because it's a big time main event. Well, who better to do that talking and run that mouth than Ted DiBiase?
He's great.
So that's your main event of SummerSlam. Well, fast forward, your main event of the following WrestleMania. We need somebody to run that mouth at Lawrence Taylor. Who better to be in Bam Bam's corner than the $1 Million Man? So he is, even though he's not in the ring, he's an integral part of the presentation.
Right.
But as with everything else, things change. He gets Tatanka, King Kong Bundy, Kama, Sid, the 1, 2, 3 Kid. He's got a few iterations of the $1 Million Corporation. But there's one moment that maybe will live in infamy forever that you and he are both involved in. Sid is doing a backstage promo. It's live. He doesn't recognize it's live on this In Your House. And he asks you if he can start again. And you have to remind him, we're live, pal. Are you and DiBiase sort of making nonverbal communication at that moment? Like, look at us, all the way from Mid-South to this. Look at us.
We were biting our tongue that about that line that Sid said, because we got a great laugh. You can imagine that $1 Million laugh echoing throughout. I think we're in San Antonio, echo out through the stadium there at San Antonio. I think that was the night that Sean and had a match with Sid.
Well, that was an In Your House that we were just talking about. It was probably on the way to that one.
Well,
I think you're thinking of the 97 Rumble, though, in San Antonio.
Okay. Yeah, probably. Hey, it's been a long time, folks.
Sure. Well,
the road has been hard on me.
We're not done yet. I want to remind everybody, the Undertaker SummerSlam main event, the Bam Bam Bigelow, Lawrence Taylor main event at WrestleMania. And now he's got one more thing he wants to introduce to the world, the Ringmaster. Of course, we know Stone Cold Steve Austin is going to become a big star, not as the Ringmaster, but as Stone Cold Steve Austin. But he is a part of introducing him to the WWF audience, and even a big part of the evolution of the Stone Cold character, because DiBiase is going to leave after the In Your House Beware of Dog show. This is the famous pay-per-view where we lose power. We have to do essentially a do-over. So we have a Sunday night pay-per-view and then a Tuesday night pay-per-view. And between those days, DiBiase gives notice. He's going to wind up going to work for WCW with a lighter schedule, a guaranteed contract, for more money. A lot of guys leave the WWF, and Vince is pretty frustrated with the way they left. And there's a lot of controversy surrounding it. What do you remember around the way DiBiase left? Did he leave the right way?
I think he did. You know, he did walk out and show up at the mall in Minneapolis, like Rick Rude.
Like Lex Luger, you mean?
Lex Luger, I mean.
Yeah.
Or well, Rude showed up there too.
Yeah, different show, but yeah, he definitely jumped.
Right.
Yeah.
So I the way those two guys jumped was not great.
Right.
It could have been handled so much easier and more professionally if the talents had chosen to do so. But they didn't. I don't know. Austin never liked that gimmick, ever. Not one day that I can recall.
Right.
But so people are going to say, well, why did Steve do it? He didn't have to do it. He's Stone Cold. Well, he wasn't Stone Cold then.
No, he was not.
And he wanted to be booked. He needed minutes on television so that everybody could see what kind of talent that he was. Many of us already knew. I declared Austin a blue chipper and all that stuff before I declared The Rock a blue chipper on television. So for me, it was a no-brainer, you know, but I'm Austin blind. And that all worked out pretty good. But he didn't like the gimmick belt. Steve didn't. He didn't think he needed a mouthpiece, and he didn't. Can you imagine having to find somebody to talk for Austin?
No.
So anyhow, Steve was uncomfortable with that gimmick, and I think Teddy sensed it. It wasn't Ted. Ted was a reason, but not the person. Just having a manager. He's going to talk for me, and he's already talked for all these other guys. It doesn't make me special, et cetera, et cetera. And Steve had all the right answers, but he wanted to be booked. And the great thing about the Ringmaster, and the only great thing I can think of, was the fact that it got Stone Cold on television.
Well, we know that Ted DiBiase is going to be on TV a little bit in 1996, and he's going to be a part of the NWO until Eric Bischoff realizes, hey, maybe I should have that job. So instead of DiBiase being the mouthpiece for the NWO, it became Eric Bischoff. So they put Ted with the Steiner brothers, and I don't know that ever really fit. Ultimately, DiBiase becomes a Christian minister in 1999, and he's dedicated his life to that ever since. But somewhere along the way, in 2004, he was offered a job in the WWE with Creative. He actually winds up working there in 05 and 06. And he was quoted as saying, I said, that's not really for me. I'm not Clint Eastwood. I'm not good on both sides of the camera. I'm good in front of it. And they wanted me to come back and at least try. So I did for about a year and a half, I guess. And it took them that long to figure out I was right. What do you remember about Ted trying to work with the company behind the scenes?
Frustrating. He was frustrated all the time. Just the slowness, the change, the direction, unexpectedly going another way that you discussed in the meetings. Just frustration. He was out of his element. He was used to controlling his world. And in that environment of being on creative and being one of several people contributing ideas, he wasn't in control of his destiny. He was just another cog in the puzzle that was very easily replaced, as are all the writers, unfortunately.
Ted eventually becomes a road agent. He's going to have various appearances on TV, including Sherry in the Hall of Fame, some WrestleMania appearances. And of course, he's going to introduce the world to his sons, Ted and Brett. I think a lot of people look back and think what could have been. In May of 2008, Ted DiBiase Jr. is introduced to the audience for the very first time. Did you see a lot of Ted Sr. and Ted Jr.?
Yeah, I like Ted Jr. a lot. I thought he had a great body, athletic, had good sensibilities as far as the nuances of wrestling. I thought that unless he stubbed his toe, got hurt, made some just bonehead decisions along the way, that he had a very bright future.
He has a nice run for a few years. He's going to team with Cody Rhodes and be paired with Randy Orton. They're going to call that faction Legacy. And he ultimately retires from wrestling in 2013. The other son, Brett, wrestled for a few years, but never really made it outside of developmental. But Ted DiBiase winds up going, rightfully so, into the WWE Hall of Fame in Phoenix in 2010. Both of his sons would induct him. The Cauliflower Alley Club banquet that took place that year would see Ted be given the honored the same year you got the Art Abrams Award. It's fascinating to take a look at this guy's career and his legacy and his history. And I grew up such a big fan, and I am glad that he's had this new lease on life. But I feel like we should at least mention that there was some controversy a couple of years ago in Mississippi where some funds were allocated incorrectly. And I believe the lawsuit that Mississippi made against the DiBiases would include Brett was listed as receiving $824,000, Ted Jr. $2.8 million, and Ted Sr. $1.9 million. I don't know the outcome of all that. I hate to see that there was some sort of controversy where funds were misappropriated or there's a misunderstanding or whatever the circumstances are. I do know that it's the only black mark on Ted DiBiase that I can see in his entire career. Like, you never hear anybody say anything negative about Ted DiBiase. And as we sort of talked about when he turned his life around and became a born again Christian, it feels like it's just been one positive appearance after another, except for this controversy that to this day, I don't think is all the way sorted out.
I think you're right. I'm not versed in it enough to speak on it, other than it's unfortunate.
Yes.
I can't imagine Ted intentionally not extorting, I don't know if the word I'm looking for, but gaining money on unscrupulous terms with his lifestyle and the way he looks at things. I don't know if he had all the information. I have no idea. And I probably wouldn't be a very unbiased guy to talk about it because I have so much respect for Teddy then, now, and forever, as the old expression goes. So that was a tough story, but I didn't follow it much because I didn't give it a lot of credence. And ironically, we don't know much about it anymore today.
No, we don't. And, it's one of those deals where, because I don't know all the details, I don't want to spend a ton of time talking about it, but I know if we don't, people are going to say, hey, why didn't you talk about? So we can at least mention that, hey, we don't know what we don't know. But as a rule of thumb, I think you and I both agree, we like to treat people how they treat us. And
yep.
If you are a wrestling promoter and you're not sure, hey, should I book Ted DiBiase? The answer is yes. He's phenomenal with fans, and fans still remember him so fondly. And it feels like when people talk about the greatest wrestler to never be the world champion, they list guys like Jake the Snake Roberts and Scott Hall. And Ted DiBiase, for me, is always right at the top of the list. And I think that gimmick, that presentation of the $1 Million Man character in its own way was the WWF version of the Nature Boy. And, because Rick would come out on TV and brag about all the stuff he had, well, Ted DiBiase was able to do that. And he created some just magical moments. And I know most of that stuff predates your involvement with the WWF. But I, for one, think that the Ted DiBiase story is an amazing one, and I can't recommend his documentary or his book enough. Let's do some questions, and then we'll wrap this one up. But before we do, I want to remind everybody that in my real life, I love helping people save money, and there's no better time to start saving money than right now at SaveWithConrad.com. Here we are in Royal Rumble season. Why not throw a couple of house payments over the top rope? That's right. We can make sure you don't have to make a payment in February or in March. You're done until April 1st. And come April 1st, no joke here, you're going to have a cheaper monthly payment. We're routinely helping our Grilling JR listeners save $500, $600, $700, even $800 a month. And you don't need perfect credit or money out of your pocket to do this. But if you've got credit card debt, if you're in a 30-year loan, it's not a matter of if we can save you money. It's a matter of how much. And let me just explain something to you. The interest rates you have on your credit card right now, what is it? 18, 28%? Whatever it is, you know you can do better. The interest you pay on your credit card, not only is it sky high, but it's also not tax deductible. Whereas the interest on your mortgage, it's a cheaper rate and it is tax deductible. So if you could get a lower monthly payment, if you could get a better interest rate, if you could go ahead and skip your next two house payments and get a greater tax deduction, what are we doing? Come on. It's the biggest no-brainer in the history of the world. But here's what we're able to do a lot of times. If you're, say, 3 years into a 30-year loan, you got 27 years left. What if I could show you how to get it down to 15 years with cheaper monthly payments? It sounds too good to be true, but we can do it for you. And paying your house off faster and living your life without a mortgage, like Mr. Jim Ross does, is the way to be. The American dream is not to just give away 29% of your gross monthly income every month until you die. The American dream is to own your house free and clear. Have that peace of mind. Have something for yourself and your family. And I can help you make it happen at SaveWithConrad.com. NMLS number 65084, equal housing lender. And I want to mention we've got an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau. And if you want to check out our reviews, read them and weep. ConradReviews.com. That's where you'll find there's more than 1,000 5-star reviews. In fact, our average rating is 4.72 stars. And check out this most recent 5-star review we got. Jamie was very pleasant to work with and made the process really easy. Folks, you want to save some money and you want to make it really easy? Hurry to SaveWithConrad.com.
Smart business, folks. Smart business. The smartest thing I ever did, other than marrying Jan, was she and I had this plan to be debt-free. And we succeeded. And I'm not bragging about that. I'm actually, I guess I sound like I'm patting myself on the back, but there's nothing like the feeling of becoming debt-free.
Yes.
Take the steps. There's steps you can take now to lessen the gap, to lessen your term of being in debt to that degree. So it's a great goal for every young couple. It's a great goal for young single guys. You know, get your ass out of debt, man, and watch everything else start growing around you. It's like fertilizing your life, without question.
Well said. SaveWithConrad.com. Keep more of your own money. Wrestling fan on Twitter wants to know, do you think DiBiase's WWF character could have ever worked as a face? Don't get me wrong, he was one of the best heels of all time, but do you think he could have pulled that off?
Oh, yes, he could have pulled it off. Would have been the best presentation of him? Probably not. But remember that we work in a fictional world. If the stories are believable enough, plausible enough, just about anything that's good will work, including DiBiase being the $1 Million Man being a babyface.
Here's another question from PB. He wants to know, in 91, I was at a signing with JR, Missy Hyatt, Paulie Dangerously, Z-Man, and Jason Hervey to promote Super Brawl 1. In the middle of the signing, Ted DiBiase showed up. He was there to say hi to friends. Was there ever any negotiation going on that you know of to get him over to WCW?
Well, no, I think we all knew that we'd love to have him because of his greatness.
Right.
I don't think there were any ongoing, it was almost like he was untouchable.
Right.
In the sense that he had such a great persona. He's getting a great push, and God damn it, Conrad, those pushes are everything. That's my push. And so he was in the midst of all the greatest run of his life. So I don't know that we could have competed with the money. But I don't know of any ongoing discussions whatsoever. He was in the same place we were, and he had friends, and he and I have been around each other since the 70s, and it was just one of those days. It was a nice day at work because you got to see Ted, and you hadn't planned on it.
Next week, we're going to be talking about one of the craziest opportunities for the WWF of all time, when the Radicals came to work for the company. How it all went down from the purview of the head of talent relations. How he struck deals with Chris Benoit, Eddie Guerrero, Perry Saturn, and Dean Malenko. We'll be talking about that next week here on the program. And next week here on the program, we're going to be watching our old pal Hacksaw Jim Duggan over at adfreeshows.com. I can't believe this is real, but as you're listening to this, next Tuesday is the 35th anniversary of the very first Royal Rumble. And adfreeshows.com is bringing you a really cool watch along event. We're going to celebrate the anniversary of that first Royal Rumble with the guy who won it. Join us over at adfreeshows.com live on Tuesday, January 24th at 9 p.m. Eastern. Another little piece of wrestling history we've unearthed is the book with David Crockett. From the mind of Dusty Rhodes, the genius that brought us Jim Crockett Promotions through 1985, we've got Jim Crockett Jr.'s actual personal handwritten red books from the hand of J.J. Dillon. And this is all in J.J.'s handwriting, but it's Jim Jr.'s book. The gates, the towns, the matches, the revenue, the angles, a peek behind the curtain that's unprecedented in wrestling. And it's all happening at adfreeshows.com. What else is going on? Well, how about jrsbbq.com? Maybe my favorite part of the show. We get to brag about all the great stuff that's going on at jrsbbq.com. Not only the two types of hot sauce or the two types of barbecue sauce, but the Chipotle ketchup, the main event mustard, the hot sauce, the beef jerky, but my favorite, the all-purpose seasoning. And by the way, when you join adfreeshows.com, not only do you get these shows early and ad-free, you get to be a part of our live studio audience. Our pal Josh says in the comments, JR, I love the hot sauce. My wife got me a bottle for Christmas. Everybody loves the hot sauce, Jim.
Yeah, it's good stuff, man. We took over a year, folks, to work on this recipe. And I sent them back, and it just wasn't quite making it. And I knew I was getting past the pale or getting it promoted real strong for the holidays. But I wasn't going to put a product out that I thought was substandard. And JR's Red Ass Hot Sauce is certainly not substandard. It's a great hot sauce. It's a great compliment. I made earlier today, late that night, to the Gangland hideout of Elliot Nez, I made scrambled eggs. Any idiot can make scrambled eggs.
Yes.
But when you add some Red Ass JR's hot sauce to your eggs as you're slowly turning them, you create a whole different animal. And so now I'm spoiled. The other thing is it's just amazing. I see those great commercials on Frank's hot sauce.
Yep.
And and it's good, by the way. I got a bottle in my refrigerator. But we're kind of along those lines. It adds heat and it adds flavor, and I think folks are going to enjoy trying it. So I hope you try it and see if you like it as much as we do talking about it. So, and we ship every day. We package orders every day in Norman, Oklahoma, and ship them out. So we don't sit on them. We want to get them out, get the product in your hands. So, and we ship every day, as I mentioned, ad nauseum. So give us a shot. jrsbbq.com. We never close, and it costs nothing to look.
jrsbbq.com. And if you missed it, I can't recommend enough that you start checking out our podcast on YouTube. Most of us who are working from home these days, we're still rocking the 2-monitor setup. The second screen experience for seeing the visual accompaniments to what we're doing here really make it. I mean, just seeing those photos from West Texas State, go out of your way. Grilling JR on YouTube.com. You want to be sure to hit the subscribe button and turn on that notifications bell, and keep in touch with us on social media. JR is at JR's BBQ on Twitter. He's at Jim Ross BBQ on Instagram. And our show handles are JR Grilling on Twitter and Instagram, and Grilling JR on Facebook. But in the meantime, the easiest and best way to support the show is get some swag. Go to grillingjrts.com. That's where you'll see the infamous "Where's My Push, damn it" t-shirt. It's over at grillingjrts.com. I don't know what I expected with today's episode, Jim, but I had a blast talking about the $1 Million Man and talking about the good old days of Mid-South and maybe the most iconic WWF character of all, the $1 Million Man.
Yeah, me too, Connie. I enjoyed it, and I'm glad we get to relive some of those moments that are so positive in my mind, and it just shows that everybody's got to start somewhere. I don't know what Teddy was making working for McGuirk, probably a couple hundred a week, if I was guessing. I know what I was making, and the monies were not great,
right?
But we knew that we're just embarking on a journey together, ironically, and that it's going to work out the best for everybody if we just keep putting in the work. Put in the work, and you find how wonderful things can be, and how wonderful life is, because you're in the world with me.
I don't know where that was going, but I love you for it. We're going to be back next week right here talking about the Radicals. You never know what to expect with Jim Ross, but you can always expect a good show and a packed house. Appreciate everybody showing up from ad-free shows today, whether it's Josh or Eddie or Mark or Keith or the usual crew, man. Thank you guys for turning up and turning out for us. And we'll be back next week talking all things Radicals right here on Grilling JR with the voice of wrestling, Mr. Jim Ross.
And ladies and gentlemen, don't forget, I must say, go Jags.
Can't believe this is real, but Woo Wings, your very own virtual restaurant concept, is now open, and fans can enjoy the legendary flavors and world championship wings by ordering with their Uber Eats or Postmates app. Woo Wings is now open in Nashville, San Antonio, Jacksonville, as well as Huntsville and Tuscaloosa, right here in Alabama. Many more locations coming soon. As a virtual restaurant, Woo Wings is looking to partner with existing restaurants in major metro areas. Tell your favorite sports bar or local restaurant you want Woo Wings in your town, and to visit RicFlairWings.com for more information on how to become a partner. But if you're in Nashville, San Antonio, Jacksonville, Huntsville, or Tuscaloosa, hop on your Uber Eats or Postmates app and look for Woo Wings and try the only chicken wings worthy of carrying the name of the 16-time World Heavyweight Champion, Woo Wings. Be sure to check out RicFlairWings.com to become a partner.